The good news is that David Pastrňák is back on the ice at Bruins camp after sitting out with a nagging knee injury. But it's kind of troubling with The Athletic already projecting the Bruins to finish near the bottom of the league standings once again.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and today's episode will be about Boston Bruins training camp as they get ready for tonight's preseason game against the New York Rangers. We're going to touch on David Pastrňák returning to camp, but admitting his knee tendinitis is something he's been managing for a long time and will continue to. We'll touch on The Athletic, not super kind on their projections for the Boston Bruins this season. We'll wrap things up with line talk from yesterday's practice and a look back at Torey Krug, who's officially at peace after a career-ending ankle injury. Again, thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Please do follow along on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button, the notification button as well, so that you know exactly when a new episode drops. You can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. That's on Blue Sky, X, Instagram Threads, TikTok. You can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been writing, talking about the Bruins and the NHL for various outlets for nearly 20 years, here to keep you informed, engaged, maybe a little fired up about the black and gold. The big news at Bruins training camp yesterday was David Pastrňák on the ice, a full participant in on-ice training sessions and practices. He does have knee tendinitis, but it's not derailing him quite yet, and his presence really changes everything for this team. He did miss the first 4 days of camp, including the preseason opener against the Washington Capitals, unlikely to have been in that lineup anyways, with tendinitis. And again, tendinitis is inflammation of the tendons between muscle and bone. I'm no doctor, but it doesn't sound very comfortable. The knee specifically, also known as jumper's knee or patellar tendinitis, a condition characterized by inflammation of the tendon that connects your kneecap to your shin bone. It weakens your tendon and, if untreated, can lead to tears in the tendon, which would be a worst case scenario. Pastrňák said he played with that all of last year. It's nothing too concerning, just something that's nagging him for a very long time. He adjusted his training over the summer. He did some biking instead of running to reduce strain. And he doesn't know if it will linger. Only time will tell. Now, despite that pain last season, Pastrňák finished with 43 goals, 63 assists for 106 points. Tied for third in the NHL. And the next closest Bruin, Morgan Geekie, had just 57 points. He also led the NHL in scoring 5-on-5 in terms of goals, assists, primary points. So for him to reach that level of production, not only with a diminished supporting cast as the season wore on, but also playing with this knee tendinitis, that's pretty remarkable. And Marco Sturm, head coach, was obviously stoked to have Pastrňák on the ice. He said as soon as he steps on the ice, there was a certain presence we were missing. Good energy, especially coming from him. Is that presence enough to name him captain? Last week, I ventured a bold prediction that maybe Nikita Zadorov could earn the C. We all know Charlie McAvoy and his importance to the team. But for me, it's still David Pastrňák who should be wearing the C next. And the fact that he fought through that injury last year and produced at such an elite rate, like, you can't deny this man's talent and his leadership on the ice, certainly. He was back on the top line with Morgan Geekie and Elias Lindholm. He joined power play drills just as they started, which is crucial given Boston's low ranking last year and with the addition of Steve Spott as coach in that area. The Bruins need David Pastrňák to be at his very best in order for this team to avoid a repeat of last year. And the line of Geekie, Lindholm, Pastrňák looked pretty good towards the end of the season. Lindholm was injured heading into last year. He had back issues. Morgan Geekie was often scratched to begin the season. And we all know how he took off. One of the top goal scorers January 1st onwards. Elias Lindholm kind of came alive in that role, thrived at the World Championships. Like, this line needs to be pretty on point in order for this team to compete. And the power play needs to be much better as well. Pastrňák's prime years are one of the top storylines that I have flagged for this season. They don't want to end up wasting this elite talent. And Don Sweeney has done some work to surround him with a better supporting cast, but there's still very much some questions about whether the roster is optimized. If Pastrňák is unhealthy, that just makes it even tougher to climb out of the hole they fell into last season. David Pastrňák is Boston's son. Everything orbits around him. This team's success, the offense. You take him out of the lineup and you're left with a leading scorer last year who had 57 points. This team already has major questions about who is going to score. And if Pastrňák is not in the lineup or even kind of 80%, then that's a real problem. He's not 100% right now. He said it's nagging, but it's manageable enough that Sturm and the Bruins can breathe a bit easier now that he's back on the ice. And now that we know that he was dealing with it all last season, it kind of gives you some comfort knowing that he was able to excel, not career numbers, but still 106 points, 43 goals, 63 assists, elevating Morgan Geekie's game, all with this nagging pain in his knee. How you get rid of it? Kind of the Rice technique. Rest, ice, compression, elevation, some pain relievers. I see Tylenol might help. Physical therapy, stretching, like all the things that, I do when I'm a little banged up from my 3-pitch league, right? So we might see a bit of load management for David Pastrňák this season, putting the R in that Rice. He's going to be wearing some compression on his knee, icing it, getting in the tub, keeping it elevated, anything to make him more comfortable so that when the Bruins take to the ice for meaningful games, he is as good as he can be. Here's the kicker, though. Even with David Pastrňák back, The Athletic is still projecting Boston for just 79 points. We talked a couple weeks ago about the over-under being set at 76.5. I said take the over. Why are expectations so low? We're going to break down their somewhat brutal forecast here as the podcast continues. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for each and every snap with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. People love using FanDuel because it fits however they like to bet. Player props, same game parlays, jumping in live as the action unfolds. Makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And if it hits, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Thanks again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Today, we're talking about David Pastrňák back at practice for the first time under new head coach Marco Sturm. Next, we're discussing The Athletic projecting the Bruins at 79 points, around 27th overall, with only a 16% chance of making the playoffs. That is much closer to the draft lottery than the postseason, and it shows just how fragile the roster looks behind David Pastrňák, Charlie McAvoy, and Jeremy Swayman. And they rightly say that a team with those three guys locked in as your core, it takes some doing to kind of bottom out. They did so last season with only 76 points. Worst season in years, decades. A lot of people thought that was rock bottom, myself included. I kind of thought you get Charlie McAvoy back, Hampus Lindholm back, Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov feeling more comfortable, Jeremy Swayman back to a bona fide starter in the NHL, a high-end starter. A lot of things went so wrong last season, and it just seemed difficult to imagine all of that repeating itself. Now, not to say these guys are Stanley Cup contenders by any stretch of the imagination, but bottoming out once again, I don't know. You seem to have the pieces in place with that core, with the surrounding core, some young guys stepping up, albeit unproven commodities. So what's the deal here? Why are they projecting so low? They're suggesting best case, 93 points, wild card contention. Worst case, 68 points, and the playoff odds just around 16%. So why so low? Well, Charlie McAvoy, for one, they pinpoint as a guy who was once in the same tier as like Adam Fox, Roman Josi, not quite at, Cale Makar territory or Quinn Hughes, but a guy in Vezina, Norris Trophy contention. He's slip sliding. PP production has gone down per 60 over the last 3 years. His zone entry defense has slipped a bit. He's still only 7, but he hasn't been able to hit another level offensively. Not that you have to be like a point per game plus to be regarded as an elite defenseman in the NHL, although that certainly helps these days. But there's still questions about whether he can power play a quarterback. Power play a quarterback? What is wrong? Quarterback a power play. He had been taken off that role last season prior to Hampus Lindholm's injury, right? So, again, McAvoy is a high-end defenseman in the NHL, but he's coming off a big injury. The pressure's on at 27 to establish himself as at least kind of in that 1A or 1B group of defensemen behind Makar, Hughes. Fox is still up there. Yossi's falling off a bit due to age, but you see those guys and up-and-comers like Lane Hudson, Luke Hughes, etc. Jeremy Swayman's another question mark. 2 years ago, he was plus 23 goals saved above expected. Last year, minus 6.43. Some analysts believe he can return to star form, but there's no safety net there anymore without Linus Ullmark, both on the ice and also in terms of that off-ice friendship and relationship. Depth is an issue. Zadorov last season was over-leveraged. Mason Lohrei remains pretty raw. Yoki Haru and Andrew Peak, they see as replacement level. And only 4 forwards project positively both ways for this team. You got Zaka, Pastrňák, Geeky, maybe Elias Lindholm. There's some real question marks about Casey Middlestat. 6 points in 16 games after the trade. He's still penciled in as the 2C. There are some there when it comes to his track record, having had some success with Buffalo and Colorado, but he's yet to establish himself in Boston and could be a trade candidate if things go sour. Morgan Geeky had 33 goals, but he had an elevated shooting percentage, so there's a regression risk there. Elias Lindholm, offense down since 2021-22. And then, of course, the Athletic has been a huge naysayer when it comes to Tanner Jeannot's contract. Grit over substance, 5 years, $3.4 million AAV. It echoes past mistakes, and it doesn't signal an understanding of where the NHL is going and where it is in terms of skill over grit. Of course, David Pastrňák remains a strength. He's elite, among the best in the NHL. Morgan Geeky's leap is impressive, perhaps not sustainable. Hopefully he's still good for at least 25 goals, but this was a team that struggled offensively last season, even with Geeky scoring 33 goals. Hampus Lindholm's return should steady things. And if Swayman rebounds, Boston could still have franchise-level talent at forward, defense with McAvoy, and in net. The Athletics model is pretty blunt. Boston is more likely to finish bottom 5 than make the playoffs. And unless McAvoy and Swayman bounce back and the depth steps up, Pastrňák, it's going to be very difficult for him to carry them alone. You see what he achieved last season, 106 points, 43 goals, 63 assists, leading the NHL, scoring 5-on-5. But he's got this sore knee that's not helping anybody. And it's going to be on Jeremy Swayman to bounce back, Charlie McAvoy to bounce back for that trio to really prove themselves as franchise level players. Pastrňák can't carry them on his knee with tendinitis. McAvoy needs to establish himself as that high-end defenseman in the NHL. The model is pretty blunt. Best case, 93 points, and you squeak into the playoffs. Worst case, 68 points. You're in full rebuild mode. I mean, bottoming out again this year may not be the worst thing, seeing as 2026 is a very strong draft class, and you could add some elite level talent with James Higgins for like the next wave. But you're wasting David Pastrňák's prime years. You are wasting Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman on the back end, both of whom, look, teams around the NHL would still love to have either one of those guys. Whether they're living up to their current contracts, it's a big question mark. They need health, they need stability, and like I said earlier, last year, so many things went wrong right from day 0 of training camp through the coaching change, the trade deadline, injuries, Jeremy Swayman never being able to find his game. I don't think everything is going to go necessarily right for this team this season, but for it to go that wrong again would be a real disappointment and would really raise some questions about even more questions. The questions are already there about Don Sweeney being on the hot seat, but it would kind of be smoking at least, if not some flames creeping up his trousers here as we head into 2026-27 if the Bruins are once again a bottom 5 team. Let me know what you think on social media. Are they more likely to squeak into the playoffs or enter a full rebuild? Look, if you want proof of how fragile the depth looks, just check yesterday's line combos. We'll dig into Marco Sturm's top 4 trios, and we'll close today with the Bruin of the day, an old friend in Torey Krug. Most people can't really name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. They do the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at Monarch Money with code LOCKEDONNHL. As training camp goes on, we're starting to see more and more of what the opening night lineup could look like. And Marco Sturm's practice lines kind of highlight Boston's depth challenges. Reading the tea leaves yesterday, I was looking at, obviously not at practice, but Bell Fraser posted the lines from Group A and Group B. One group had Geeky with Lindholm and Pastrňák, Zacha with Middlestat and Arvidsson. That is our consensus top 6, although Marco Sturm did say that he wouldn't mind starting Pavel Zacha at center. We'll touch on that here in a moment. The third line really looked like it could be Fraser Minten with Tanner Jeannot and Marat Husnudinov. So Minten as a strong two-way player, Husnudinov with the speed, Jeannot with the grit on the right side. Then the fourth line of Mike Yesimont, Sean Corrali, Marcus Stelic. The top line, look, that's pretty much, you can put that in Sharpie. They had 69% expected goals, outscored opponents 16-4 in 94 minutes together last year. Geeky's breakout, Pasta's dominance, Lindholm's two-way play equals a foundation for this lineup. The second line, though, is still a little risky. Middlestat may be miscast as a second-line center. Arvidsson's a bit of a reclamation project. Zacha's coming off a down year and perhaps better suited down the middle. On the third line, you have Minten, NHL ready, but still dealing with a bit of a learning curve. Husnudinov's very versatile, but perhaps a lack of finish. Jeannot needs a bounce back, and while I believe he could become a fan favorite, you need to see something from him to even justify that $3.4 million AAV. The fourth line, energy, PK identity. Maybe you'll have John Beecher rotating in and out with Michael Esimont, but you'll notice that there's some guys missing here. There's no Matt Poitras. There's no Fabian Lysell. There's no Matej Blumel or Alex Steeves. Where do these guys fit into the lineup? I've said time and time again, as a reminder, Minten, Poitras, Lysell are able to be put on assignment without having to go through waivers, whereas these other guys who were brought in would have to go through waivers. Not that they'd be selected, but they're easier to bury in or start the season in the AHL for some more seasoning. If Marco Sturm is serious about balancing kids with vets, well, this top 4 doesn't really show it. Minten, Husnudinov, kind of the only injection of youth into this current lineup. Maybe you have Minton as the second line left winger with Middlestat, Arvidsson, an MMA line. Maybe you have Pavel Zacha moving down to play with Jeannot and a more skilled winger like Blumel. Maybe you have, there's endless combinations because there's so many guys in the running for these spots. There's like 6 line combinations you could deploy out there. This top 4 that I mentioned, then you could have, Beecher, Lysell, Blumel, with some other guys still in contention, right? Sturm needs to balance kids with vets, size, and skill, but there's uncertainty pretty much everywhere after line 1, and even maybe on line 1, because we don't know if Elias Lindholm is kind of all the way back, and he has a limited ceiling. So there's still uncertainty. It'll be interesting to see what the lineup is for tonight's game against the New York Rangers, a game we will recap here on tomorrow's episode. Before we finish today, talking about the Bruin of the day, I'm giving it to Torey Krug. There was an article this morning in The Athletic about how his career, he didn't play all last year after having a subtalar fusion surgery. No athlete has ever returned from this ankle injury. He was forced to retire at 33. This is a guy who was undrafted, undersized, but managed to play 700 NHL games. Beloved PP quarterback in Boston who played above his stature time and time again, took this team or helped this team reach the 2019 Cup final. And we all remember the big hit that he leveled there. He said he gave it his best. His dad, Kyle, in that Athletic profile said the one thing scouts didn't do was measure his heart. We see that up here in Toronto. There was the height don't measure heart with respect to Marcus Stroman, relative to all players who are undersized. He's at peace. He's focused on his family. His kids are loving hockey, and he's considering coaching. He's not done with the game by any means. It would be cool to see him back in Boston, but it seems like he's found a home in St. Louis. They set him up for life with that nice contract that he signed. Symbol of Boston grit and heart and skill, a reminder of what the current team still kind of needs. Sturm's lines show the team is in transition, not really quite set. Torey Krug's story shows what being a Bruin really means, playing with courage and with heart. David Pastrňák showed that last year, playing on this sore knee, reason why he should be pinpointed as captain, in my opinion. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. Tomorrow, we'll break down the preseason matchup against the Rangers. Another look at how Sturm's lines, systems perform against real opposition. Please subscribe on YouTube. Follow on your favorite podcast app. Find the podcast at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me at ENC McLaren. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. Check out the Locked On NHL podcast as your second listen. And thank you for making Locked On Bruins part of your day, your team every single day.